Hi, welcome to the Create, Inspire, Convert podcast. We're all about demystifying online marketing here, specifically around content, tech, and growth strategies to grow your business online. Ready for this week's episode? Let's get started. Hi there. Welcome to Create, Inspire, Convert, a podcast for business owners and marketers who are looking to deepen their knowledge about creative and experience-focused online marketing. I'm your host, Amanda Rosen. Let's get to this week's episode. Hey, and welcome back to another episode. We're continuing what we started talking about, months ago, because I'm the first person to tell you this is hard, like keeping up with your content production when life just happens and gets in the way. But I'm here, I'm showing up, and I'm ready to keep going on this series that we've started, which is all about how to analyze whether or not your content is working. Here's a quick refresher on what we talked about last time before we jump back into this whole series. So last time we talked about when you're measuring the effectiveness of your content, you've really got to understand that content analysis falls in line with the marketing funnel because the content that you're putting out there serves multiple purposes and falls in different parts of the funnel. And we'll talk about what that means because you should be creating content for each stage of the funnel. So there are those three stages: awareness, consideration, and conversion. Ideally, you have content for each of those three stages. Why? Because the funnel exists for your business. Like, you want people to move through those stages so they ultimately go from finding you, getting on your email list, to becoming a customer. But each person that you come into contact with is actually in their own imaginary funnel called a customer journey that follows the same stages. So these things are happening together, and you can't really know where someone is in their particular journey because you're not a psychic, unless you are, in which case that's awesome. But what you can do is make sure that you have content at each of those stages of the funnel so that no matter where somebody finds you, no matter where they are in their journey, you have something to meet their need. So that is the purpose of content inside of the funnel. And that's why when you're analyzing your content effectiveness, you're kind of looking at it in these segmented ways, like the content that I put out for awareness, the content I put out for consideration or growth, and then the content I put out for promotion or conversion, that kind of thing. So everything should align between the content, your funnel, in other words, the customer journey, and your funnel, which your funnel is really that thing that ultimately leads to a purchase. So how somebody becomes a client or a customer. And at each of those stages, there are different things that you're analyzing. So in the last episode, we talked about how do you analyze the effectiveness of awareness content. And we also really talked about what exactly awareness content is. And so in today's episode, we're going to talk about the middle phase consideration, aka growth content, what it is, and how to analyze its effectiveness. So before we do that, I know just get into it. But I really want to tell you, just as a refresher, what those three stages are, just super quick. So I mentioned they are awareness, consideration, and conversion. I call them awareness, growth, promotion when we're talking about content. And so awareness content, this is the stuff that explores behind the scenes of your life and business. So it introduces people to your values, your beliefs, you share your story. People are interested in you as a person or your business. If you are sharing content online, not as a personal brand, or you are not the face of your brand, they're interested in what your business or your brand stands for and kind of like the story, like who are you? Why does this business exist? What's going on with you? As it relates to the customer journey, people are in an awareness phase if they're just becoming aware that they have a desire that you can fulfill, and they're kind of looking for more information about what that means in their life and what you can do for them. So again, you don't know if someone's in this, and it can happen rapidly. Sometimes people can quickly find you immediately online, check out your about page, decide they like you, and move forward. Other times it takes longer periods of time. It doesn't really matter. That side doesn't matter. Again, your job is to just make sure you have content that sits at those stages. So that's the awareness stage. Consideration or growth, as it relates to content, these are things that show your authority in your particular industry or your niche, and you're teaching the specifics around what you do, why it's valuable, and why it's beneficial to that particular person that you can serve or help. as it relates to the customer journey, when people are in this phase, they're actually looking for that kind of content because they're considering their options. So they've finally been able to name the desire that they have. They've identified that you are an option for fulfilling that desire. And now they just need to know more about your business. They're trying to figure out what you do, why you should be a part of this consideration process, and how you can help them and improve their life in some way. So this is really about, like I said, education around what you do, specifically those benefit statements, how you intangibly help, how you improve someone's life, and the value that your business brings to their life. And then the final phase, which we'll talk about next time, is purchase or promotion or conversion. So this is, as it relates to content, this is stuff where you state what you offer. So you're talking about what you do. You provide testimonials, and you make it really easy for someone to become a client or a customer. You explain if there's anything complicated or kind of different about your checkout process or what it's like to work with you. You explain all of that. And in the customer journey side, this is when that person finally decides that you're the best choice for them and they become a client or they become a customer. So this is a transactional phase. So sometimes people like to put down into conversion, like joining an email list. That's not really what we're talking about. That actually goes up in the consideration phase. It's like a mini commitment, but it's not the action that we're ultimately looking for. Because when you are talking about the funnel for your business, you're talking about something that brings people from point A awareness to point C spending money with you in some way. It grows your business. Okay, so this is why having those touch points or content at every stage of the funnel is so important. And it's also why measuring your content is not so simple as, hey, I got 31 likes on that post, it worked. Because there are specific metrics that you need to be tracking at every stage. And when you start tracking those, you'll get a snapshot of the health of your funnel. And you'll be able to pinpoint specific areas you need to optimize. Like, for example, maybe when you listened to the last episode about awareness metrics, you went to your content, checked out the engagement rate for the last 2 weeks on your social media posts, and you realized that the topics of X, Y, and Z tend to get you more engagement than other ones. Well, now you kind of have an idea of how to further refine your content. And today, as we get into the content metrics for consideration and growth, you'll see how you can then look at those topics that worked well for engagement and now put them under the filter of consideration. How well do they work to bring people onto your email list or to get people sending you a message or whatever, to take that next little step forward? So it builds upon itself, and it creates this self-contained analysis and optimization opportunity for you where you can then figure out what's going on, troubleshoot, improve, iterate on what's working, and let go of what's a waste of your time. Okay, so let's talk about those content metrics to track for the consideration or growth phase of the funnel. So similar to awareness, you're still going to be looking at social media content if you post on social media, and website content like a blog. You could also be looking at podcasts, video. It's kind of that longer form content or content that's going a little bit more in depth. You're specifically going to be zeroing in on how many interactions or website visits turned into, so not just the traffic, which is what you're looking at awareness, but what that traffic did once they got there. You want to see what of that traffic turned into something like an email sign up, or a discovery call booked, or a contact form submitted, or sending you a direct message or a private message on social media with the intent to learn more about what you do, not just like a random, hey, that was interesting. Leaving a comment on a piece of content, asking you to reach out to them for more information, or the comment is like in depth, like they want to have a discussion. They're here to like learn more, or they're sharing something that indicates they're kind of further along in the journey. If you're looking for signals that tell you this person has moved along the funnel and also along their customer journey. Because the consideration or growth phase is content designed to move someone closer to taking that ultimate action that you'd like to see, which, as we said, is spending money with you, so becoming a client or a customer in some way. And when someone interacts with content in this phase, they are looking for answers. And we talked about this just a little bit ago. They're trying to learn more about what your business does. So less about you as a person, which was really what awareness was about. Or if you're not the face of your brand, it's kind of like how your brand exists in space, like, or in the industry, the values and beliefs, the story behind the brand. They're also trying to learn more about how your business can make their life better. So again, that's those benefits. It's the value that your business brings to the table. How do you transform their life? How do you make their life easier? How do you help them save time, money, whatever it may be? And then more about the way that you work with people. Like if I were to say yes to you, like what does that look like? So like concrete examples would be like, do you have free shipping if you're like a product-based business? Or for services, like do you have different tiers of packages that I can select from in case you're not in my budget? So this type of content focuses on sharing information, expertise, and authority. So a really great example of this type of content is that swipe to read carousel style post on Instagram that breaks down kind of like a complex subject in sequential images. And people have been adapting this, as I'm recording this, to Reels as Reels become kind of the bigger content form on Instagram. But we still see carousel posts and we see carousel posts showing up in a video form in Reels. Another really great example of this is a piece of content sharing maybe about like a recent interview you had where you got to talk about your expertise, so you were featured somewhere. Another example is any sort of free resource you offer that someone can only receive if they join your email list, or you're like hosting a webinar or a challenge, or you have like something of value to give them, and that whatever that thing of value is that you're giving them answers questions, addresses objections, provides some kind of deeper level of knowledge, like it's helping them along in that phase of the journey and shows them what to do next and kind of bumps them closer to that conversion side. So that means when you're measuring the effectiveness of this content, you have to kind of zero in on directly connecting that content with an action. And how do you do that? Through attribution. This conversation is going to get a little bit more technical now because in awareness, it's very easy to look at the metrics. It's all sometimes what's called vanity metrics. It's definitely a part of the conversation because you need to know how much traffic you're getting, how many people you're reaching, what those people are doing, what the engagement is. It's all important information, but the analysis doesn't stop there, which is why we're continuing the conversation. These next two phases, so that's consideration and conversion, it gets a little bit more technical because you need to be able to tie content to an action, specifically an action like joining an email list or even getting on like a text message list, any of that kind of stuff. All right. So really what attribution is it's a marketing term that refers to the ability to connect one action to a prior action or one step to a prior step. In other words, you're like connecting the dots between things. So you could definitively say, this piece of content that I put on my blog directly resulted in 10 email signups. Like that's the kind of information you're looking for. Or this post, this reel that I put on Instagram directly resulted in this amount of traffic, which then turned into these email signups. Like you're looking for that level of detail and it's totally possible, but that's why I say it gets a little technical. So just bear with me. We're going to work through it. You can do this. Okay. So before we get onto the technical side of this, I really want to note that this really applies not for like all of your content. So like your awareness content, you don't necessarily need attribution, but it really applies when you're trying to attribute something like social, blog, video, podcast to that email sign up discovery call and so on. So when you want to connect one channel to another channel. So a channel, again, is a place where traffic or people exist. So social media is a channel. Your website is a channel. Your YouTube channel is a channel. The podcast is a channel. Your email newsletter is even a channel. These are all channels where people kind of move through and take an action. So an example of this would be like, I want to know how many podcast listeners from this episode downloaded my free resource. So that's kind of like your puzzle that you have to figure out. Like, how am I going to build that attribution so I know what that is? Or I want to know how many social media impressions on this post resulted in a discovery call form filled out. It's not really as important for things like comments and not even necessarily for direct messages unless you're saying like in your social media post, DM me with the word blah. So then you would like totally know where they came from. But for the most part, it's not as important with those things because first of all, you can't really attribute much to them again, unless you're giving like super specific directions, but you also already know like where those people came from because they're commenting like on the platform, they're DMing you on the platform. So by nature of that, you already know where they came from. They came from that platform or that particular channel. Okay, so here is how you get attribution set up for your consideration phase content so you can measure the effectiveness of it. First, you kind of have to pick a channel that you're measuring, of course. So that could be your social media, your blog, podcast. Just start with one. Since we've been talking about social media, and that tends to be the one that people generally think about, we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about other channels in a moment. So second thing you're going to do is choose the action that you want attributed. And you really can only measure one action at a time for a certain period of time. And this is really important. So some examples are asking people to fill out a discovery call form, or asking people to go to a blog post and download a free resource that's on that blog post, asking people to fill out a contact form. Now, I said you can only do one action at a time for a certain period of time because it's a bad practice to have many calls to action on your social, blog, videos, podcasts, like all over the place. Too many calls to actions means confusion and no action. And this is kind of why I don't really like those Linktree sites. So it's just too many options. So like a great example is you want people to download a free resource that you're talking about in a social media post. You tell them the link is in my bio, but the link that's in your bio is actually a Linktree. And when they tap it, there's like 5 other links in there. Well, now they may or may not have forgotten, like now they're kind of distracted by all the other links and maybe they don't go to the free resource. So you just kind of shot yourself in the foot. So I don't really recommend doing that, like unless you're not going to be using your social media for consideration, which is totally fine. But if you are going to be having like a specific action that you want people to do, you need to just have that be the only link in your bio for that reason. Now you can always cycle your calls to action. So let's say this week you want to have a free resource, but next week you have a webinar. You can totally change that. Of course, like you should. But you need to stick with one at a time and just pick that time period. And if you're wondering how to pick that time period, it all goes back to having something called a promotional calendar in place, which I will have to talk about in another episode. But if you have a promotional calendar for your marketing, then you'll kind of know like how to cycle through those calls to action. Okay, now the third thing you're going to do in this process is to set up something called a UTM parameter. So a UTM parameter is a universal tracking piece of information, and it goes at the end of your link. Now, you cannot skip this step because UTM parameters specify things like the channel that should be associated with things like the content that you posted. So remember, the channel is the pathway you've created this content on that people are consuming your content. So think of it like a road or a highway. That's what a channel is. So Instagram, Facebook, blog, podcast, these are all channels. UTM parameters, I'm sure you've seen before. They're just little bits of text that are appended to the end of your link. They don't change how your link works. They simply pass information back to your analytics software. So this means, for example, you can create a link for your contact form with UTM parameters unique to the channel where you're sharing the link. And so you can specifically share things like the source, the medium, and the campaign. You can use a free UTM builder tool. Just like if you Google UTM builder tool, you'll come up with a bunch of options, and Google actually has one. Now, I want to emphasize, you don't have to have Google Analytics in order for UTMs to work. Most analytics softwares will register and understand UTMs because it's just universal tracking information that's reported back to the software that's gathering the data. It's just meant to show you traffic. So what this does is it helps you understand by channel and by content piece the traffic that you received from that content piece. In other words, it helps you determine if all of the energy that you're putting into a particular channel is actually worth it. Just think about it this way. So like, let's say you have like a brand new blog post and you share about that blog post on Instagram. It obviously exists on your blog for like organic traffic. You also share about it on your Facebook business page, and then you randomly decide to send it to your email subscribers too. That is 4 separate channels. You go and look at the analytics and you see, wow, my blog post got like 100 views over the last week, but you don't know where they came from. You might have a little bit of vague information inside of your analytics software because it will usually break out like source sometimes, but sometimes it'll just generically say social media, or sometimes it will generically say direct or something like that. And it's not really the granular level of information that you want. It would be so much better to know, okay, of those 100 views, 50 of them came from my email newsletter people, 5 came from Facebook, 10 came from Instagram, and so on and so forth. That's the kind of level of information that UTMs can give you. This is like part of the puzzle, okay? Because we're trying to close the gap between the traffic and the action. So this is the traffic part of that. So the UTMs will give you that. Now, when you go and Google your UTM builder tool, you'll see there's some blanks you can fill in. The most important ones are source, medium, and campaign. Source is literally the source of the traffic. So you could put social media, or you could just put Instagram. I would get specific. So like specifically whatever the source is, because your analytics software is going to generically tell you social media already, but you want to know the specific platform. Also, I will say this is especially important if you use platforms like Clubhouse as an example that don't necessarily always register inside of an analytics software or as a channel option. So super important. So your source is going to be like literally where it came from. So Instagram, Facebook, newsletter, that kind of thing. Medium is going to be on that source. What is the medium that you used to send this traffic here? So on social media, if it was Instagram and you talked about it on a reel, you would put reels. Or you could get even more specific and you could put like reels underscore and the date of the reel that you posted. But you don't have to necessarily do that because the next blank that's really important is called campaign. So on campaign, I like to treat campaign, it's really designed for like if you're doing paid media and you put like the title of the campaign there, but you don't have to use it for that. The campaign, I like to put like a keyword. So like what was the theme of the content that I posted so that I know, it was that reel about blah. So you could put like maybe the name of the trending audio that you used or the date that you posted that particular thing or the subject line if it was an email newsletter or the title of the blog post, that kind of thing. So now you can kind of visualize in your head when you send traffic with that particular link, it's going to tell you the traffic that came from that source, Instagram, on that reel using that particular trending audio, which you can already see, I hope, how valuable this information really is. Now, the last thing is that means for this particular blog post, you have just like the regular link for the blog post. You're putting that into your UTM builder. You're creating UTMs for all of the different places where you will be sharing this blog post. And that means all of those places get those unique links. So you may have 3-4 unique links all going to the same place, the same blog post, but all having different UTM parameters depending on the channel where you're sharing that link. Now, I did just tell you before, pick one channel, one CTA for a specific period of time. So if you're just beginning, don't overcomplicate things. Like if you're going to be sharing a blog post on social media, just share the blog post on social media. Don't muddy the waters. Don't confuse yourself. Just get comfortable with the process and then add on more later. Okay, now, because you're only sharing one call to action at a time on one channel at a time, you should definitely be able to tie back the actions to the channel because we just said like you're going to keep it simple. You're just going to share that blog post only on social media with these UTM parameters. And then on that blog post, you've decided that you're going to put an email opt-in form for people to get some kind of free resource. So you'll know because you're only sharing that blog post on social media that for the most part, anybody who submits that form, they came from social media. So this is kind of a way to divide and differentiate without getting like super complicated, that attribution so you can understand. So that means for like a week, you would only be talking about that blog post on social media. That's why I say pick one channel at a time, one call to action at a time for a specific period of time. So then you'll know during that period of time, whatever happened on that blog post, those people more than likely came from social media. Now, that you do have a slight risk, and this is why attribution isn't like totally 100% accurate all the time. You are probably going to get organic traffic. So you might have some organic submissions on that form or whatever. That's okay. The number probably won't be enough to kind of like throw things off. Like generally organic traffic doesn't go through the roof immediately, especially on like a new blog post. It takes time. So you might want to keep the length of time for your experiments somewhat short, just so you know. Now, all this to say, like, what if you're hearing me say this and you're like, this is going to move way too slow? and you want to share multiple calls to actions, well, in that case, you need to divide them out by channel. So you're still keeping it simple, but instead of only having one call to action for one period of time, you could have multiple calls to action, but you're dividing them out by channel. So you would not do blog post on email, blog post on social media, blog post on YouTube. You would actually do like blog post on social media, something else on email, something else on YouTube, so that they would have different calls to action on them. And then you would be able to divide it out that way. If you don't do that, you really won't be able to tell where people came from. Like, just imagine this. If you were sending all those channels, email, YouTube, Instagram, to this one blog post, and then you had a bunch of people submitting that form and you got like 50 subscribers, when you look at those subscribers, you really won't know where they came from because you were sharing it on 3 different channels. And so that is like saying that. You may think, well, I would just be happy to have 50 email subscribers. Yes. But really what you're trying to do is figure out which channel is worth your time and which channel results in what type of action. So you're getting really like strategic about how you are creating content, which is like why you're doing this. You don't want to be a content hamster wheel, do you? I don't think so. So in practice, what this would look like on Instagram, I am only going to be sharing the contact form link on my website. So that is the CTA for Instagram. Whatever content I am creating on Instagram, I want people to submit a contact form. That's it. On YouTube, I'm only going to be sharing blog post links with free resources. So whenever I put up a YouTube video, I'll direct them to read that week's blog post. And on that blog post will be a form to get some kind of free resource. And then on Facebook, I'm only going to be asking people to join my email list through my subscribe link on my website. So everybody ends up on your list, but they come there different ways. So some people come through a contact form. Some people come by filling out a resource on a blog post. Some people come through a subscribe page on your website. They all end up on your list, but you've divided them out by the form, which is how you would then know. So then you would go into your email software and you would see like, I've got 10 people coming in through the contact form, 5 people coming in through the subscribe form, and 3 people coming in through this resource form. Now you know those people, they came from Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. So that is the value there. And then you can look at those numbers and be like, well, it took me like for the same amount of time and effort on Facebook and Instagram, I got more subscribers through Instagram. So why am I spending all this time on Facebook? And then on YouTube, I only got 3. So I either need to abandon it or I need to keep experimenting because maybe I just haven't quite figured out the magic mix there. So that's how you can kind of differentiate that. Okay, now what about organic traffic, which we just kind of talked about before, which kind of will throw a wrench into this because you can't control organic traffic. Well, the only way to truly divide it out and close your attribution loop so you really can see what your content is doing, like the purposeful content that you are sharing versus what organic traffic is doing, is to have duplicated content on your website that isn't indexed by search engines and to not put that on your menu. But that gets complicated. The gist of it is, let's say, like going back to Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. On Instagram, I'm only sharing my contact form link on my website. Well, you probably have a contact form that's on like a menu on your website that is probably indexed by Google, meaning Google, Bing, Yahoo search engines, they crawl all the pages on your website, they index them. It's like, think of it like a table of contents. They know themselves, like internally, these are all the pages that this website has. And so when people are searching for information that's related to this website, I'm going to look at the index and I'm going to determine if any of these pages are ones that the person searching may want to see as part of their results. Duplicated content can hurt you with ranking and results with something called SEO, search engine optimization. Duplicated content means that you're usually competing against yourself and it can lower your rankings. But that is only if that duplicated content is being indexed. So imagine that you have 2 contact forms. You have one contact form that's on the menu. It's like on your website visible. You have a second contact form. It's totally identical to the other one, but that page you only share on Instagram. That page needs to not be indexed by any search engine. This is usually a setting in your website software where you can select to not have the page indexed, or you can use a free tool like Google Search Console to control what's indexed and not indexed. Now, this is getting like super technical. We don't have the time to get into this here, But if this is a topic that interests you, go ahead and shoot me a DM on Instagram, Create, Inspire, Convert, and let me know, because I'm happy to get into the details of it. But that's the gist. Like, if you truly want to eliminate organic traffic and like truly understand attribution wise, just purely from the content that you're strategically putting out there, what's happening, and you want to divide out organic traffic, that's what you have to do. You have to create these duplicated pages. Don't index the ones that you're sharing on social media or wherever you're sharing them, and they just exist all by themselves, like over there on social media. That is like the short answer. But if you don't want to do the technical method, which again, you don't have to, you can also just accept that organic traffic is going to trickle in. It's going to inflate the numbers slightly. If you start getting worried, like as you're watching inside of your analytics software, your organic traffic, because you can see in there like what percentage of your traffic is organic. You can probably extrapolate from those numbers, like how much it's skewing the consideration reporting that you're doing. And if it's nothing to like worry about, I honestly would not even go down the rabbit hole of index, no index, duplicated content and all that, unless it becomes like some crazy issue where you're like, this organic traffic is just messing everything up. So for now, I would say let it go and just follow this method, which let's recap what that method is. So in order to understand the effectiveness of consideration and growth content, you have to tie the content back to an action that resulted in someone connecting with you, most often joining your email list, getting an SMS list, booking a call with you, some kind of middle action right before they become a client or customer. You can do this by isolating your calls to action by channel and then using UTM parameters to create tracking traffic a lot easier. So you choose one call to action that you're putting on a channel for a specific period of time. You're creating UTM parameters, and then you are knowing in your back end, usually the email sign-up forms that exist on the place where you're sending people to. When people use that form to sign up, you'll know, for the most part, excluding organic traffic, that those people came from that particular channel. Pro tip, you can get as sophisticated with this as you want by using different opt-in forms for different free resources, and then using those forms for specific channels, which we kind of talked about before, because the other example was like, what if I want to have multiple calls to action? That's fine. Isolate them by channel. You'll have multiple forms now and multiple forms associated with specific channels. So you'll know when people fill out the contact form, which I'm only talking about on Instagram, that's where they came from. You'll know if people fill out this free resource guide, well, I'm only talking about that over here. So that's where that came from, that kind of thing. And that's it. So again, this was a pretty technical episode, but you're going to see as we get deeper in the funnel, like I said, measuring content effectiveness gets more technical by nature because no longer are you just talking about traffic or engagement rate. You need to put meaning behind those numbers. And the way that you assign meaning to those numbers is by seeing how many people you moved from one channel to another to where they got closer to you, where you can then deepen that relationship and that connection with them by demonstrating your authority, by sharing your knowledge, by showing what it's like to work with you, by helping them understand the benefit and the value that they receive by working with you. So next week, we'll talk about how to attribute the content for promotion or growth or conversion content. And this is really my favorite thing to measure because it's where everything comes together. So once you start seeing like conversion data, which is going to build upon what we talked about this week, you're going to get so much more information and you'll be able to see like this awareness type content brings me this many email subscribers and then those email subscribers become this customer. And it's going to be really great. Once you have that full funnel attribution and you're seeing like what's going from end to end, that is really when the magic happens. And when you can start getting so strategic about what you do and how you do it. All right. Thanks so much for listening this week. I really appreciate your time. If you got anything of value out of this episode, would you do me a huge favor? Shout me out on Instagram. You can tag Create, Inspire, Convert. I will reshare you. I love hearing what people take away from episodes. And also, while I've got you here, do me one more favor. So if you were hearing me talk about consideration content and all these examples and you were like, I don't know what this means, and you were wishing that you had a way to figure out what it means, you might be interested in this tool I have called the Marketing Strategy Generator, which really creates your content strategy in the form of content pillars by asking you a series of really strategic questions. And the answers to those questions are populated onto this little grid, and the grid is divided into awareness, consideration, and promotion. So then you get all of the content topics, or sometimes called pillars, for those phases of the funnel, which means when you fill out that form, you'll then have all of the content topics that you need to create awareness content, to create consideration content, to create promotion content. And there's even a little training in there that shows you, well, first of all, how to fill out the form so you aren't going in there blind. And then second of all, how to then interpret those results so you know, like, how do I take these topics and like, how do they actually become pieces of content? It's only $37 and you can check it out at createinspireconvert.com/marketing generator. And if you use the code CIC10, you can save 10% on it. So there you go. All right, that's it for this week. I will see you guys next week. Thanks again so much for listening.